So in this video, we will be deploying a load balancer service to GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine. Outlines are like we will write a Dockerfile for Dockerizing the application. That will be a simple application. And then we will build the Docker image for that application. And then we will push that image to Google Container Registry. We will write Kubernetes manifest file for deploying the application using a deployment object, and we will write a Kubernetes manifest file for deploying the load balancer service for the application. So let's get started. So what is up people, welcome to the new video. As you know, in this video we will be deploying an application to Google Kubernetes cluster. So these are the outlines of our project. So let's go to our VS Code, and here you can see I have already set up all the steps you have to do in this project. So first of all, you need to create a Kubernetes cluster on Google Cloud, right? So first of all, let's create a cluster. So here, if you go to Google Cloud Console, so you will see, if you go to Kubernetes Engine, you will see this page, right? And here you just need to click on the create, and you will see two options. One is autopilot mode and standard mode. So we will go for the standard mode, and here you actually don't need to fill any of these. So you just need to go to this user setup guide and just click on the my first cluster, right? And just click on create now. So now it will create your first cluster with all the setup. So it will take some time. So while it is creating, let's write our Node.js application, very basic application with Dockerfile, right? So let's create a folder here. Let's name it the Node app, and let's go to the Node app directory from our terminal. And here, first of all, we need to init our project and using npm. So let's run this command npm init-y, and it has created a package.json file. And now we have to install Express because it is Express app, right? So I'm installing Express, and now let's create a new file called app.js. And this app.js file, first we will import Express package, right? So for importing, actually we cannot use import directly because of its ES5 JavaScript. So we will use import here, const express. We will use require. Let's const express require express, and let's initialize an express. So app is equal to express. So now let's run this application on 80 port, right? And we can say as a console log message, let's say server is up, right? So now when our application will run on the 80 port, we actually need to see, we need to get a response back on the 80 port, like our application is running successfully. So let's add a get route here. So for home route, we need a response here, right? So let's write a request and response, and we need hello world or something as a response. So we will send like okay, server is up and running, right? So now let's test this application using node app.js. So it is saying server is up, and let's go to our browser. If we go to localhost, so you will see here server is up and running. So our application is running successfully. So let's close this, and now let's quickly check our cluster is being created, or it's created. Okay, so it's being created. So we need to write the Docker file, right? So here you can see in the steps, like first step is create a Kubernetes cluster, set up a connection. So we will set up the connection after the cluster creation. And we created a Node.js Express application. Now we need to write the Docker file for our application, right? So let's create a Docker file here. So in our Docker file, first of all, we need to specify a base image. So I'm adding this flag, platform is equal to 64. So it is for basically I'm using Mac OS and I will be using Node 14 as base image, so it will not do any effect. So if you are using Mac OS, please use this flag, and if you are using Linux or something, so you are good to go, right? Or so now let's specify a work directory, and let's say as inside our steps we have user app. So first of all, copy our package.json file to current working directory inside our Docker image. So why we are copying first package.json? Because our package.json file has all the dependencies which are required to install inside our application so that our application can run, right? So we are copying this, and now we have to install those dependencies. So let's run npm install command, right? So when our all dependencies are installed, now we have to copy all the files for our application inside Docker. So now, as we know, our application will run on 80 port, right? So on the container we have to expose a port also, so for that, so that we can see our application running, right? So we will expose a port on our container. We will expose 80 port because our application will run on 80 port, right? So now how we will run our application? As we know, on our local machine we run using node app.js. So the same, we will add the same command here, node app.js, right? So our Docker file is ready. So now what we need to do is we need to build our Docker image. So here you can see we have the command docker build, and we will tag our Docker image as well. So what is this? Now the question is, right? So we will push our Docker image to Google Container Registry. So every Docker registry has its host name. So Google Container Registry has this us.gcr.io, and how you will get this us or something? So you just need to go to your console, and you just need to go to your Google Container Registry console, and here you can see your container registry host. If it is us.gcr.io, you're good to go. If it is something else, so you can use that, right? And your image will be in this format. So you need to add your project ID here, and then your image name, and then you can add a tag for your image, right? So let's now build our Docker image. So one thing here, before building, I am adding a docker ignore file, because we have installed our node modules inside our project here. So for that, if we don't want to copy these node modules folder, because it is very huge folder, right? We want to install all the dependencies inside the Docker container. So let's ignore node modules folder for Docker here, right? So now let's build our image. Let's tag it as us.gcr.io, and let's copy our project ID from here. Okay, so add your project ID, and now add your image name. Let's say node app, and as a tag I am adding here version 1, and where we want to build, in the current working directory. So now it is building the image, so it will take some time for it. So our image is built. So how we can check? We can run the docker images command. So you can see our new image is this node app v1, right? So we have all some more images also, but we don't need to focus on that. We only need to focus on this v1 image. So now this created 7 seconds ago, right? So now what we need to do, we just need to do, like, we need to push our Docker image to GCR. So before that we need to authenticate with GCR using Docker. So how we can do that? We just need to run this command gcloud auth configure docker. So I already installed gcloud CLI in my local. So if you don't have this, you can install, or if you don't want to install, you can directly use Google Cloud Shell, right? So now let's run this command gcloud auth. Also, like how you can get this command, you can just run this gcloud auth help, and here you can see all these things. So here you can see like it has this command docker auth configure docker, gcloud auth configure docker, right? So let's close it. Let's run the command gcloud auth configure docker. Okay, so it has added the credentials. Okay, so these are already registered. So now let's push our image. So first of all, let's see which are the image. So let's copy it. Okay, and now let's run docker push, and here we need to add the tag. We have specified version 1. So now it is pushing our image to Google Container Registry. So our image has been pushed to Google Container Registry. How you can check? You can also check from the console here. You just need to go to images on your container registry, and you can see your images here. If you click on this, you will get your version 1 here. This is the image, right? So we already have the path of this image here. So what we need to do now, let's go to our steps. So now we can test our application running using Docker. So we can do that. You can do that if you want. So now let's write our manifest file for deploying our application to Kubernetes, right? So let's create a folder for Kubernetes here, and let's write a new file, deploy.yaml. So in every Kubernetes manifest file, as you know, 4 important fields are there. Like one is API version. So what will be the version here? Apps v1. So because deployment object only support on app/v1 API version. And now let's add kind. And what is the third one? Metadata and specs, right? So kind will be deployment. So just add the metadata here. Let's add the name for our deployment. Let's say node app deployment. Okay, let's close it and make it a little bit big. Yeah, so and now add some labels to it. So for labels, let's add type backend or app node app, and in spec, first of all, add how many replicas we want. So it is for testing, so we don't want more workload, so we are adding like only 1 replica here. And now we have to add selector, right? And before adding selector, let's write our template for our pod here. Let's say metadata for it, and name node app pod. And for labels, let's add the same labels, I guess. So we can add the same labels as we have in our deployment, but we need to take care of like selector. In selector, the labels should be the same as we are defining in our template, right? So let's say type backend and app node app. So now add spec for our template and containers. So let's write the name for the container. Let's say node app container. And now the important part here, we have to specify the image. So what was the image URL? This URL, right? And we just need to copy it and paste here. Now we already know we have exposed a port on our Docker. So for our application, so we have to add ports here. Let's say ports, and first will be container port. And what was the port? 80, right? Now in selector we have to add our labels. Let's say match labels, and which labels to match, type and app. So we can just copy and paste these two here. So now our deployment file is ready. So now next what we need to do is, our next step is to create a manifest file for our service, for our load balancer service, so that we can access our this application from outside, right? So let's create a new file here. Let's call it service.yaml, and here, so as we know, those 4 important fields we need to add. First is API version v1 and kind service, because we want to create a service, and what will be type for the service, that will be load balancer. And let's add some metadata here, name node app load balancer service. Let's write some specifications. First of all, we want to expose some ports, so ports will be 80, right? Container port 80. And now let's add our selector so that it can select some specific pods. So our selectors was, you can directly copy and paste these labels here, right? And what will be the type of this service? Let's add type will be load balancer. So this is the complete service file, and this is the deployment file, right? And so now what is next? We need to apply these files to create these resources, first deployment and then service. So we want to run the kubectl command for apply these files. So first of all, we need to set up a connection between our cluster, Kubernetes cluster. So as here, if you see, our cluster is ready. So for setting up a connection, for connecting to your cluster, you just need to click on this connect, and here you can see the command. Just copy it and just paste it here, so it will connect to your server, to your cluster, and it is connected now. So now we can run our Kubernetes commands. So let's go to Kubernetes directory, and we can see we have 2 files here, deploy.yaml and service.yaml. So for deploy.yaml file, let's apply this kubectl apply f deploy.yaml, right? So it is focus on this thing. This is creating inside the gcloud cluster, because we already connected with gcloud cluster. So as it is saying, your deployment is created. So how we will check our deployments? We can run this command kubectl get deploy. So it is not ready yet, it is created. So let's check again. Okay, so it is not ready, so it is taking some time. So now you can see our deployment is ready, our pod is ready, and it's successful. And now what we need to do is, our next step is, we will create a service, load balancer service, so that we can access our deployment application, right? So we already have created our service.yaml. Now we need to apply this, right? So kubectl apply f service.yaml. So you will see our load balancer service is created. So how to check our services? Kubectl get svc or get services. So here you can see we have 2 services here. One is Kubernetes, it is a default cluster IP service, so we don't need to do anything with it. So now here we have our load balancer service that we have created. So main part is external IP. It is pending, so it will take some time to get external IP so that we can access our application, right? So let's check it, how much time it's taking. Okay, so now we have our external IP here, so let's copy it. Now we just need to go to browser and paste this here, right? What is running? Okay, so our application, you can see server is up and running. So our application has been deployed successfully, right? So you can get all these notes of steps how you have to do this. Okay, so this all you can get on my GitHub, so don't worry about that. So this was a manual project, and in the next video we will do the same thing in a more automated way. So we will use GitHub Actions CI/CD pipeline for deployment of these service and the deployment to Kubernetes, and we will use Terraform instead of direct these YAML files, so that we can manage our infrastructure, Kubernetes infrastructure, using Terraform, right? So that's all for this video. So if you like this video, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.